Hello everyone, it's Tony Moore from Rock Interface, here to show you the first time setup for the Redline PM-50 panel meter. This is the 1/8 DIN model. There's also a 1/16 DIN model. The idea is, if you're familiar with the old Redline panel meters, it fits in the same size hole, so it'll be a quick replacement when you want to upgrade to the newest models. I'm going to be showing you today the DC current panel meter. They also make this so it can take in and measure voltage, resistance, RTD, thermocouples, and process. You can get relay outputs or solid state outputs, and it can communicate over Wi-Fi, Modbus, Ethernet, and serial, depending on the modules you plug into the back of this unit. It's fairly modular, which is a great aspect of this product. So this is the main board right here. This one is directly attached to the screen, and we have a relay output module here, so you can just plug it right in. And this module lets you bring in 120 volt power and then bring over 15 volts to the main module. So if you don't have 24 volts and you only have 120 volts, it's not a problem with this meter. And the rest of this is just an end cap and a dummy module to fill it out. So the wonderful thing about this, if you want to add some more outputs, some more inputs, or a variety of other options, you can just pull out one of these and plug what you need in, and you can actually extend this to another level. Okay, so let's move on to wiring this device so we can get our initial setup going. So I've got 120 power here, and I'm going to plug this into my AC to DC module. So I'm going to go to pin 1 and pin 2, and that would be right there. Since I'm using ferrules and these are plug-in fittings, I can just shove it right in. So these first two pins right here give me is where I put in my 120 power, and then I'm going to want to run wires over to my main board to bring over my 15 volt power, because that's what the main board runs off of. Pin 6 on the AC to DC module will go to pin 1 on the main board, and then we're going to want to run pin 5 over to pin 2 on the main board. So now we supplied power to our main board, and now when we plug this in, it should power up. Okay, so we got power onto our main board and we plugged it in. This is the screen that comes up upon power up. So it's got a setup wizard. You can set it up from there. Import configuration. These panel meters come with this little micro SD card. You can, if you have your configuration saved off from a different unit, you can plug it in, import, and then you're up and running. This would be a quick way to swap out units if you had to do that. We're gonna set it up through the browser, so I'm just gonna do the steps necessary to get Wi-Fi active. So I hit exit and then exit, and this is the default widgets built into this device. So let's hit up here. There's a little gear with a unlocked little padlock symbol in there. Press that. Need to put in admin password. Very important that you write this down. Keep a good record of it. You cannot factory reset this if you don't have the password, and you're going to be locked out of certain setup functions without the password. Typically I print out a sticker and slap it on the back of this unit, so I can always reference it right there. So putting in a new password. So you need to use symbols, uppercase letters, lowercase letters, and numbers. And it has to be at least 8 characters. Okay, so we're powered on. Now we're ready to set up our Wi-Fi connection so that we can configure this through the browser on our computer. So you want to hit the gear at the top, go log in if you're not logged in already, click on network configuration under the second tab, click on Wi-Fi configuration, turn on enable Wi-Fi. I like to use access point. Client, you can connect to an existing Wi-Fi network and it's just a device on your existing Wi-Fi network. Access point, it acts like a Wi-Fi router sort of, and it broadcasts its own Wi-Fi network. So nice thing about access point, if you don't have access to an existing Wi-Fi network or your signal strength is poor, you can get around those issues. So I leave DHCP server on. I'm fine. I don't touch IP address, subnet mask, gateway, SSID. This is what's going to show up when you try to connect your computer. I'm just going to call this PM-50. And then password. I'm just going to put in ABC. Oh, let's clear it first. ABC 1 2 3 4 5 6. Before we go ahead and configure this panel meter, we want to check to make sure we have the latest version of firmware on this panel meter. So if we go back in with the gear, log back in again, we go to that tab, we switch over to calibration, firmware, and update down here. Go to about this device. It says firmware version is 1.4.3. That is the latest, but I'll show you where to double check that. Google Redline PM-50 firmware, PM-50 graphical meter software. Here it is. Firmware download, build 1.4.3. So as you can see, that build number matches the firmware number on the panel meter, so we're good to go. But in case you weren't the correct one, you're gonna want to get a USB device you can use to access this tiny little chip, and then you can just download, and you don't need to unzip or do anything with that file. Just directly place it on the root of this little chip, and then you plug it into the bottom of this panel meter. There's a little slot right there next to the main board. So we got the chip in. Now you press the little gear at the top, log in. We're already logged in, so we're good to go. You want to click on this third tab here and then cursor over until we get to misconfiguration. Click on that. Click on firmware upload, and then as you can see, the SD card firmware is displayed and the active firmware on the PM-50 is displayed. They are matching in this case. If not, we'd press upload and it should update the firmware, and then the panel meter will restart, and then you're ready to go. Now you're at the latest version of the firmware. You're ready to put in the settings to the browser. Hit the gear at the top, reactivate the Wi-Fi by turning it off and on again. Apply and exit. Now you can see the symbol will update in a minute here. In the meantime, we can hit the gear and log out. So now we're logged out, our access point is active, and we're ready to go on the browser. So just to double check, you forgot what your IP address is. Let's log back in. And you can click on it and then see, in my case it's 192.168.1.10. Now let's log back out. Now we're finally ready to put in our settings through the browser. Going to my Wi-Fi connection, looking for the SSID I set up on there, which is PM-50. Hit connect. My network security key I put in is ABC123456. Hit OK. Should connect now. Alright, it says no internet secured. Perfect. Now we put in HTTPS 982.168.1.10. Sometimes when you do this, it's going to say it's an unsecure connection. You have to click proceed anyways. Since I already done that, it didn't come up this time. So you can see this is mirroring what's shown on that display, but since we haven't put in any parameters and there's nothing wired in with analog, it's not showing any numbers here. So we're going to want to log in with that little gear in the corner. Same password as we put in on the panel meter. And now we're in system settings. So there is a few parameters you can only do through the display, but what we're going to be doing today is all stuff we can do through the browser. Click over to the third tab, device, signal input configuration. This is going to be setting up your analog signal. We're using current. We're going to use 4 to 20 milliamps. Input sample rate, I just put it really high. Display update rate, 2 per second is fine. Display units decimal point is fine. Actually, I'm going to move it up a little bit. Rounding value, that's fine. I usually don't touch the filter or filter band, but scaling points. So we're gonna pretend we're measuring a bin level. So we're just gonna go 0 to 100. So 4 milliamps is gonna give us 0, and 20 milliamps is gonna give us 100. Hit save. Now we're going to set up the outputs on the board so we could tell our main system that we're in an alarm condition. Like in this case, we're simulating a bin, so maybe the bin's too full and needs to be emptied, or bin's too empty and it needs to be filled. So we click on set point configuration, set point SSR logic. We're going to be switching ours over to sourcing, so it supplies 24 volts out of the output when the alarm condition is on. So we got our two outputs for set point 1 and 2. Set point assignment, I'm going to make them both relative. Set point action, absolute high unbalanced hysteresis. You're going to want to go to the manual if you're not familiar with these terms. They're pretty technical and complicated, but they make perfect sense once you go through the manual. In this case, with this setting, it's going to turn on whenever I'm above 80. So if you remember, we're scaling 4 to 20 to 0 to 100. So this means we're at 80% of between the 4 to the 20. So once we go above 80, output 1 is going to turn on, and once we drop below 80, it's going to turn back off. I'm not going to touch the rest of these settings, but as you can see, there's delay timers. You can reverse the logic. There's latching. There's lots of different ways you can set up these outputs. Now I'm going to set up set point 2. I'm going to make this our low alarm. So set point 1 was above 80%, so we're going to say bin's too full. We need to empty the bin, so we're turning on alarm. Set point 2 is going to be our bin's almost empty. We need to fill it back up. So set it to relative. Set it to, so just so you know, the difference between relative and absolute. Relative goes by the offsets that you put in, so you can put in a tearing button as a function key if you wanted to, and you could zero out your value. So if you set it to absolute, it would ignore that offset. I always like to keep it at relative because I want to use that offset if I need it. Set it at absolute low, and we're setting it to 20. So when it gets below 20% of our 4 to 20 milliamp signal, it's going to turn on the output, and when you get back above it, it's going to shut off again. I'm going to leave all the other settings the same, except I turn the color orange. instead of red, and then hit save. Now let's go over to our screen. Widget selection. So you can swipe at the sides of the screen and move over between the screens. So there's 2 widgets shown per screen, so there's 2 screens on this device. We're going to stick with the gauge. Analog input units is going to be bin level percentage. I'm going to go 0 to 100. These are just different colors on the gauge. You don't have to touch those. Widget number 2, we're just going to show the current value, and let's call this bin level percentage. So now if we did this correctly, it should show up right here. So we see it's bin level percentage. We got a gauge and numerical indicator, and since we don't have a signal on, we're well below our 20% threshold. So yeah, your output is turning on right now. So let's get our analog input and outputs wired in so that we can actually see some data here and play around with it. First, I'm going to unplug this unit. Always suggest you remove all power from your panel meter before wiring. We've got a analog signal generator. This is gonna be our bin level meter or bin level output device. So on the main board, there's some analog inputs, and there's a variety of options with excitation and voltage versus current. There's a whole bunch of different ways to set this up. We're just going to use a very basic. We're sending out a common to our signal generator, and a signal generator sending back our 4 to 20 signal. So we put the 4 to 20 signal into 17 right there, and we're going to put our signal ground in 14 right there. Okay, and so this is enough right here to get an analog input signal. Now I'm gonna take the excitation power 24 volts from pin 10, and I'm gonna supply that to pin 3 so that I can provide power to my outputs. This pin 10 here that supplies 24 volts, it's up to 50 milliamps, so it's not a lot of amperage. You don't want to be powering something major out of it, but these relays only are 7 milliamps each, so it can easily power those and a few more. So pins 4 and 5 are solid state outputs. We're gonna use these 2 relays to demonstrate that our outputs are turning on. So relay 1 is going to go in output 1, which is pin 5. Relay 2 is going to go to output 2, which is pin 4. And then we're going to pull the common off of the board as well, which is pin 11. Like I said, 11 and 10 is giving you 24 volts excitation, but it's very low amperage, so you don't be powering anything major off of it, but like a little relay like this is certainly a good application for that. We finished wiring up our analog input and our outputs that are going to our relays. Now we're going to turn our power on. Give 120 volt to the AC to DC board. And now we haven't turned on our signal generator yet, which is going to be our bin level. So we're below the 20% threshold. So our low bin alarm output is turned on, which you can see by that little indicator light. Now I'm going to turn on my signal generator. and move it to a middle value. So we're between 20% and 80%. So both our outputs are off. Bin level is at 50%. And that's based on an analog signal of 13.1 milliamps. Now this number might be a little off. You can put in an offset if there's some resistance in your wires and the signal it's displaying there is a little bit off from what it's showing here. That's why we have offset settings available. So let's move this up above 80% and move it. So now we're at 17.4 milliamps, which is being scaled to 84% full. And now our bin to full alarm is turned on, which, as you can see, is turning on that relay. Let's go back below that, 20%, and the other relay turns on. So as you can see, there's a lot of different settings you can set up in these panel meters, so they're very versatile, and I love that you can set it up through a browser. It's a little bit easier than clicking on the screen, but just to show you, if you swipe over, you can see set point status. If I go above the set point, that set point's on. Now the other set point's on, and it's displaying the highest value it's ever seen, the lowest value it's ever seen, and totalizer, which we haven't really set up in this demo, but that's another option you can work with. And you can set up function keys or timers, or there's a variety of options that you can use to reset these values and clear them as needed. Like I've seen customers that have an input that they have brought in, and that input will clear these so that every time you run a cycle, you show your maximum just for that cycle, and then you have like a timer to automatically clear it out. So there's a lot of different ways you can set these up to display information. Thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. I know this is pretty informational dense, but should help you with the initial setup of the PM-50 panel meter. I hope you have a great day.